Yes, guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to another live stream. And as always, we have got a packed show for you. The latest on the future of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang as a deal seems to be inching closer. The latest in Chelsea's pursuit of Wesley Fofana, as well as the latest on Frankie de Jong and many other players, including a possible loan move to Manchester United for Christian Pulisic. And as always, George, thanks for your time, mate. Great to have you on board. Mate, let's get into it. Reports coming out this morning that, Chelsea are prepared to spend another £150 million on the likes of Aubameyang, Fofana, De Jong potentially, Anthony Gordon as well. How pleased are you to see that, in the first window, the owners seem to be making a big statement?
Yeah, it's good to always, be active in the window, particularly with Chelsea in a transitional period. We're having to rebuild, and it's action needs to be taken. We haven't got long to get things sorted, and I think time is a virtue. We've certainly proved that with the signings we've brought in so far. I mean, the three that we've added, there's no doubt in their quality, and I think they not only improved the strength of the squad, but actually straight into the first team. And we saw that against Spurs, really, the way they all just kind of interlinked and impacted the game as well in their own ways. Still a lot to be done. It's not all going to be solved in this window, but I think it's obvious to all Chelsea fans that a centre-back and a forward are both the priorities, so at both ends of the pitch. And from what I've heard and from what, although there's not really been any major updates, I think it's quite obvious that Chelsea are in for Fofana and are just trying to negotiate a price where both clubs are happy. And with the forward line again, there could still be, some shocks in the news and perhaps a bit surprises and eyebrows raised, but as long as we get two over the line in whatever capacity that is, I think Chelsea fans on the whole will be happy.
Yeah, no, I think, it's great that, the players we've linked with, I think have all been, top draw. Anthony Gordon, for me, we'll get into him later. He's been the only one where I've gone, I'm a little bit unsure of that. Not because he's a bad player or anything like that, but just a bit unsure with the price and how we would kind of see him fitting in. But everyone else, you've looked at it and you thought, yeah, top player. You can see exactly what they would potentially bring to the team. So the free signings so far have been exceptional, but we do need more. We do need a lot more. By the way, guys, big up everyone in the chat. Thanks for tuning in as always. What we got here, it looks like Aubameyang will be here. Yes. We'll get on to Billy Gilmore as well. Potential permanent move to Brighton could be in the offing. George, let's get to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang then. So that's kind of one that's now, he's been linked with him for a few weeks now, but it's kind of gathering momentum this week. And literally today from Fabrizio, not so long ago, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang deal meeting in the next few hours. It's been scheduled since last Sunday. Main focus will be on personal terms, length of contract, and salary will be discussed today with Chelsea. Right after that, Chelsea will prepare their first official bid to Barcelona. I think verbally, a bid of about £14 million was talked about, but no official bid's gone in. Reports saying, it could be around £22 million. And Chelsea, Todd Bowley, Tuchel are convinced that Aubameyang will join. Obviously, we still got to go through the meeting, etc., and all that. But George, this still seems to be getting closer. What are your thoughts now that it looks like Aubameyang could be a Chelsea player, maybe by the end of the week or certainly by the start of next week?
I think if you take all the stardom out of the whole Ronaldo debacle and the fact that, the name on the back of the shirt, I think this one's the one that makes probably the most sense in terms of Tuchel's relationship with Aubameyang. He is Premier League proven. He's a goal scorer, slightly younger, hungry, something to prove in the Premier League, and for the price as well. Wage-wise, I mean, it will still be a lot, but it won't be as much as let's say if Ronaldo, was looking for a club. I think this one makes the most sense. Again, he's got the pace, he's got that interchangeability where, yes, he'll be a number 9, but could play in different situations and different positions. I like him as a player. The only thing is that Barcelona are, historically quite difficult to deal with. And it could go right down to the wire. He hasn't been there long, so I assume he's still. I think
he's only been there since January.
So
6 months he's been there.
I don't think this is a case of Aubameyang being unhappy or even wanting to go to Chelsea, this might be a business move from Barcelona, perhaps trying to, because with all the registered players that they've needed to get on their books, perhaps paving the way for someone else to make an exit out. But again, if you take everything into consideration, with the Gordon situation, with Ronaldo, with some of the others that we've been linked with, I think this one ticks more boxes than most.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that, mate. Yours sounds a little bit crackly. If you go out and then come back in, and it might sort it out. Yeah, nice one. Yeah, no, I do agree on the Aubameyang. Whilst Ronaldo is obviously the standout name, etc. It's a massive name, top player, as we all know. I mean, it's very much a one-season deal, and with all the baggage that comes with Ronaldo, as great as it is, and as much as I would absolutely love it. At the same time, you think about, okay, Aubameyang, 5 years younger, I think at 32, 33 years of age, knows Thomas Tuchel, knows the Premier League, obviously like obviously Aubameyang does. Aubameyang with a point to prove. I think it is exciting. I mean, it's not like, a top draw name where you think, oh God, this is like, I can't believe this guy's coming. But I think I'm here for it for a number of reasons. One, Thomas Tuchel wants him. I think that's a big plus. And I think now any questions about, Tuchel's kind of talent identification as such, we can look at it and we can say that Chalobah, we think is going to, or it's hard to say, after a couple of Premier League games in a pre-season, but it very much looks like Sterling, Chalobah, Cucurella and stuff, they're going to go on and be phenomenal signings. So I think his judgment can be trusted. And if he wants Aubameyang, he's got a good relationship with him. As we've said, Aubameyang's got a great goal scoring record under him, a point to prove as well, because it didn't end that well for him at Arsenal, despite his success there, being the captain, winning a couple of golden boots there as well. So another big reason I'm here for it is the potential meltdown from Arsenal fans. Always pleasing to see, and Arsenal players have done well when they've joined Chelsea. Ashley Cole, Giroud, Fabregas, there's Champions League winners there, there's Premier League winners there. So maybe if Aubameyang comes, we might win the title. Who knows? Or we might win the Champions League. You just don't know. But I think, George, I've seen people, saying that, like someone for like Aubameyang, 22, 23 years of age, someone that effectively joined Barcelona on a free transfer 6 months later, could potentially be leaving, sort of 22 million pounds. Some people think that's a bit over the odds. I mean, I personally think for a player of his quality and his track record, I don't think in this day and age, 22 million pounds, I don't think it's much money to spend on someone of his proven caliber as well. I mean, would you agree?
Yeah, does it sound okay, first of all? Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I think it's fine, mate. Yeah.
I think so. I know we're going to get onto Gordon in a second, but for me, that was ridiculous. I mean, there's just, apart from maybe the potential, I don't think there's any. I think that's outrageous fee to be paying for someone who's not Premier League proven in any way. Aubameyang, there's no doubt in his goal scoring ability. Again, wherever he's gone, he seems to get goals. And I think, again, the relationship he has with Thomas Tuchel is so important, because it really helps with the adjustment going straight into a side. New side's always difficult because we, having to get used to playing a new way, a new system. But the fact that he knows Thomas Tuchel's demands, his way of coaching, the fact they get on, it makes so much difference as a striker if he can just concentrate on his football and scoring goals, which is ultimately what all footballers need to do. I think bringing in a new entity who's not used to Thomas Tuchel, hasn't worked with him before, just takes that extra bit of time. And the bottom line is we don't have time. We've been desperate for someone who can score goals. And if he can just come and get hit the ground running, which I'm sure Aubameyang could do better than the other ones we've been linked with. And again, for that, I think that's good value. I honestly do think that's good value.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. I mean, of course, there's always downsides to every deal. It doesn't matter who you're signing. Yeah. But I do think, this is very much as close to risk-free as you can get, in my opinion. It's 20 million quid, which obviously to us normal people was a ridiculous amount of money. But in football, in the transfer market these days, 20 million is like spending 20 quid. Like it's not a lot of money to spend on someone who's a proven player. It's going to be a short-term fix. We know that. He'll be here 2, maybe 3 years. He knows the manager well. He knows the league well. He'll have a point to prove with how it ended. He can score. He can score goals. And I know we've gone on about, creativity issues, etc. But I'm almost of the opinion now that, yes, we do need to create more, but we do create a lot of chances. I think just as big a problem as the creativity is the fact that we've got no one up there that you can rely on to put the ball in the net. I mean, Havertz, prime example at the weekend against Tottenham. What a ball in from Reece James. You just know, we don't know for certain, but you know pretty much, give or take, that Aubameyang is going to stick that in the net, and he'll stick the ball in the net when given the opportunity, sort of 8-9 times out of 10. Whereas you're looking at others like Havertz and stuff, and you're thinking, well, he might put it in the net 3 or 4 times out of 10. You know, despite his quality in different areas. So I think this definitely makes an improvement. It definitely adds a clinical aspect to the attack, and for the price being mentioned, I think it makes sense. I mean, George, do you envisage him and Havertz are just going to share that number 9 spot through the middle with the amount of games there are to play? But you'd expect Aubameyang to play a lot of football if he comes in.
Yeah, he's coming in for the short term, as you said, and he's coming in to hit the ground running and start, I think, for Chelsea. I think a lot of speculation about the missing piece of the puzzle. We all thought that was Lukaku. Didn't work out, but I think Chelsea are there, mate. I think people are underestimating Chelsea, thinking that we're some sort of, gone off the rails, got no chance. But I honestly don't think we're that far away from closing the gap, particularly if you only have to look at Liverpool at the start of the season. I know it's very early days, but they don't look the same without Sadio Mane. I know it's going to take time for their forwards to also adapt, but they're stumbling a bit. City, obviously, very, very good, looking very solid, and we all know that perhaps they're going to be favourites to win the title at a canter this season. But we're looking to close the gap, and Thomas Tuchel keeps saying we're in transition, and short-term fixes aren't always a bad thing. And
no.
for Aubameyang, I think for both parties, I think it makes sense, because Aubameyang needs regular football, and I think Chelsea can offer him that. We can offer him Champions League football, and Chelsea just desperate. Not even necessarily for goal scorer, because we've had goal scorers at the club that haven't worked. It's like you said, mate. Presented with the chances, do they have a track record of putting those away, probability-wise, more success rate than failure? And with what we have at the moment, anyone through on goal, Pulisic, Havertz, Mount, you really just don't know.
Mate, you look at our best finishers are probably some of our defenders. Like, I wouldn't back any of those forward players to do what Chalobah or Reece James did.
No, exactly.
You just wouldn't.
I mean, look at a classic one that stands out for me last season. Mason Mount in the League Cup final. I mean, hitting the post from there.
Yeah,
and he's one of our better players. Couldn't score. And yes, Timo Werner's gone, so that's one of the players that we know really struggled to score goals. But I think Aubameyang, look, any highlight reel or whatever doesn't really give a full picture. But what does give a full picture is his stats at all the clubs he's been at, and there's no doubt that he scores goals, and he's a natural finisher. So again, there's not a lot of risk, like you said, with the money involved. So I just think this is a much better suited thing than chasing this Gordon deal, which I think is outrageous. But
I mean, again, I'm sure we'll get more information as the day goes on. Obviously, this meeting in the next few hours, we should get a bit more of an idea there. But I do think that this is a deal that's gathering pace and could definitely be done by the end of this week, or if not, definitely Monday, Tuesday next week. And I think it would be a good complement to add to the already attacking players that we've got, particularly with the likes of Pulisic, Hudson-Odoi, Ziyech wanting to move out, which we'll come on to later. Let me just get to this one here in the chat. Who drops out of the front three of Obersigns? Well, I think it's obvious. I think Havertz drops out. I think when you look at it at the moment, Tuchel very much is going 3-4-1-2. Like, we've seen Mount play deep behind a front two of Havertz and Sterling. So you'd very much presume that if Tuchel continues with that, it'll be Mount behind Sterling and Ober. That's what you think. But again, as other people have said in the chat, it will be rotation. Aubameyang's not going to start every single game, but you think he's been bought in and he would come in to play. So like he will play, and I think he'll play quite a lot. And I hope, like Red Star saying, Ober will show the Gunners why it was a mistake getting him out. I hope so, mate. I'd love Aubameyang to score at the Emirates. It would just be phenomenal. It would be, mate. It would be absolutely perfect. But moving away from Aubameyang, more information should be coming through towards the end of today on how that meeting went, or first thing tomorrow. Let's move on to another target, George. It's gone a little bit quiet here. We've kind of had I think we're in agreement that the money is probably on the large side. Again, it's what Everton value Anthony Gordon at. But these rumours first emerge, or not rumours, the reports first emerge after the Spurs game on Sunday. Obviously, we're doing a player rating stream, and like that news came through that Chelsea had a bid of around £40 million for Anthony Gordon rejected. Subsequently, went back with a second offer earlier in the week. I think on Tuesday, Tuesday, I think it was. 45 minutes, an offer worth about £45 million was rejected. Now, it's understood that Anthony Gordon's keen for the move. Everton are concerned that his head's been turned. He wants to join Chelsea, as you would expect. Of course, you'd want to join Chelsea from Everton. It's an exciting project. We're adding a lot of top young players. It's undecided what Chelsea are going to do next. Haven't gone back with another bid as of yet. I mean, George, what are your thoughts on Gordon? Obviously, not played a lot of Premier League games, 51 Premier League games, but I think one thing that people tend to do, and I'm pretty guilty of it myself, is that we look at, as soon as we're linked with someone, look at the cons straight away rather than what they bring. So, for Gordon, you might think, ridiculous amount of money for someone with not much experience. Look at his numbers, they're not that great. But if you actually sort of look into it a bit more, I'm not saying by any means I think this is a great signing, but it's a top young player, someone with a lot of potential. We've seen him have good games. Had a great game at the Merseyside derby last season at Anfield. He was exceptional. He pops up with a few goals. He wouldn't be coming in to score goals. I mean, George, what are your thoughts on this Gordon thing? Now we've had a few days since the Spurs review to kind of digest it and stuff. What are your thoughts on it? 2 bids have been turned down. 50 million quid's a lot of money, but again, it's what Everton value him at. And I suppose rather than what you've got right now, I suppose you're paying for the potential in the coming years as well.
Yeah, I think we're being railroaded a little bit here because Frank Lampard doesn't want to get rid of another forward, particularly with the injury problems that they've got. And obviously, I think he's an Everton. I don't know if he's an Everton boy.
He's a scout. He's a local boy.
Yeah, so obviously they're gonna market him up slightly more as well. Yes, of course he'll probably want the move because these types of clubs don't come calling often, and if you're in good form, which he is, supposedly so, then you're going to want the move when it arises. But I still don't know, mate. Obviously, like you said, it's a good point that you make. There are people in place at the club that obviously it's their job to find players and look at all these things in detail, which we overlook as fans. We just say, he doesn't score, he's shit, and whatever, he hasn't scored any goals, so what's the point? And 50 million is outrageous. But these people are assigned to do these jobs, and a lot of the players that we've bought in the past that perhaps we've turned a blind eye to have actually done very well at the club. So there are pros with every con, but I just think for me, Chelsea are in a different position at the moment where we're desperate for a proven goal scorer who can put the ball in the net, and I honestly just don't think he's the answer. If we were winning the league and he was a squad player and we thought we just want to add a second or third choice striker just to add some competition in the role, fair. But I think when it's become this desperate and so obvious that Chelsea are perhaps very well set up this season, other than a striker, I think spending £50 million on a player that's played as many games as what we're asking to pay money wise in the Premier League, for me, it just doesn't make sense.
It's almost $1 million a game. I think he's played 51 Premier League games, but I suppose I think you look at it and even the club's recruitment strategy is changing a little bit as well. You're noticing now that there's a willingness to want to sign up the best young talents, the best young English players as well, and Anthony Gordon would fall into that category. But for me, if we've got someone on our books like the likes of Callum Hudson-Odoi, who is a very talented boy, you'd probably say, all right, a little bit different to Gordon, but there's not much difference. You wouldn't say that Gordon was miles better than a Hudson-Odoi or the other way around. You'd probably say that Callum Hudson-Odoi is probably slightly better than Anthony Gordon right now. Similar sort of ages. He can't get any games at Chelsea at the moment, any minutes. He's looking for a way out on loan. So why would Gordon come in for £50 million and essentially what minutes is he going to play? I mean, I was discussing it with the lads on Tuesday on the stream, saying that like £50 million, we're saying, surely he's going to come in and play. But then you look at Richarlison at Spurs, he's essentially, he'll start some games, but he's essentially going to be a bench player. Do you reckon we're in a stage now, George, where 50 million quid and you're sat on the bench is kind of going to become a bit more of a norm? Whereas before, if you bought him for that money, you were definitely playing. But I don't see how Gordon, if he comes in for £50 million, is going to be a weekly starter. I just don't think he is.
No, and look, we've been on the channel before and expressed that money isn't the way that the the Premier League and football as an entity is growing, that sometimes, £50 million these days isn't actually a lot of money. I mean, I know it sounds
it's not.
ridiculous,
It's ridiculous, but it's not.
and and a lot of people have been on the show and said, look, it's not our money, and we've said this before, and who cares? It's not us spending it, so why do we get so irate about it? But I think when you consider the other offers on the table for someone who's scored nearly 100 Premier League goals in Aubameyang, and for £14 million, and perhaps the greatest goal scorer of all time in football for around the same price, I think it's absolutely bonkers that Chelsea are considering someone of. I get the the youth and the fact that he could be a star in the future, but we don't need that now. We need someone ready to go now. And I think £50 million for Gordon, I just think is.
I mean, we
I can't get my head around it, mate.
It's a lot of money. As I say, like it's the first target this summer that I've been like, I'm a little bit unsure on that one. I'm not quite sure it makes sense. But at the end of the day, if Thomas Tuchel wants the player and he's a big fan, I mean, reportedly Pep Guardiola is also a fan of Anthony Gordon. But Everton are in a strong position. He's one of their star players. I think he's got several years left on his contract, which gives them a bit more leverage as well to get a bigger fee out of us. But potentially what might help us maybe bring the fee down a little bit is by offering some potential deadwood players. Maybe Michy Batshuayi, maybe Ross Barkley we can include in something like that. Maybe just bring the price down a little bit. I'm not sure. But it's gone a little bit quiet on the Anthony Gordon front so far. But yeah, I'm not against it. But I just think for them, if it was like 20 or 25 million, I'd be like, yeah, okay, kind of makes sense. Maybe loan him back to Everton for the rest of the season or something like that. But I very much think he'd come in and he'd be expecting to feature.
No, and put it this way, I think I'd be happier with that if he came in, whatever the price, on the basis that we got rid of some players in the deal and we signed another forward. I think if we had Aubameyang and Gordon, I'd be very happy. But just bringing in Gordon and saying, well, we've addressed the forward problem and that's it. Because fans, yes, we'll give him time because he's young, but if he's coming in to start and Chelsea are and the owners basing it around, we've addressed that. We've given you £50 million to spend a striker. Here he is, and we get Gordon. I think fans, they're not going to be happy because I think someone like a Ronaldo gets time because of what he's built in his career, rightly so, because of the way he's proven. Gordon, I mean, I think he would get a lot of stick quite early doors if he didn't start hitting the ground running. So, but you never know. I mean, you just never know with these players. He could.
But just on that, obviously, how this is slightly side tangent, but we might as well, whilst we're talking about young players, how impressed have you been, George, that Todd Boehly, not only we're looking to build now for a team that's competitive this season and for seasons to come, but we're also signing up some of the top young talent from around Europe, from in England, as well. We've signed Slonina, the young goalkeeper from Chicago Fire, 18. Amari Hutchinson's coming from Arsenal, a 17-year-old. We've obviously picked up Chukwuemeka as well from Villa, very promising young talent. Looking at Anthony Gordon, we're bringing in top talents from around Europe, from within England. How pleased are you to see that? And that Tuchel seems to be giving full responsibility and a lot of trust in Neil Bath, who's very well respected within the academy, and to very much bring through this next generation of players as well as the current ones.
Yeah, Neil Bath's been working at the club for, decades now. And I've got full confidence. Chelsea are one of the best infrastructures for growing young talent. People can argue that they don't get the opportunities at Chelsea, but we've got an incredibly high ceiling at the club.
I think we've got 7 players in the first team squad that have come through the academy.
It's a myth at the end of the day. It is a myth, And you've said on the show plenty of times, and it's completely right. If you're good enough, you'll play. It's as simple as that. And it is. You think about professional football, that really only 1% of those players actually make it to the top leagues. It's almost impossible as it is, even if you are a professional at under 21 level, to get that chance and then to take it and to establish yourself. It is incredibly rare for any club. But Chelsea setting such a high ceiling of not just in a league and saying, top half time, we actually demand success. So it's incredibly difficult. And our infrastructure is one of the very best, other than maybe Manchester City's and perhaps other clubs in the past like Southampton, who create incredible talent, youth system and scouting players. I think we're one of the best, and that's something that Roman Abramovich certainly wanted to change as soon as he came in. And I hope that the new owners kind of take that and put it onto the next level, and they seem to have been doing so.
Yeah, but it's true, and I think it's important. Red Star saying that Jose said that we use the academy to sell players. I think it's twofold. The academy's got two purposes: to obviously try and produce players for the first team, which it has, and also to produce players that might not be good enough for Chelsea, but are good enough to play in the Premier League, and to make profit for the club as well. Like it works both ways. It's not just to provide players for the first team, but it's also as a money-making business as well. But yeah, as Lee's saying in the chat, Neil Bath has done some phenomenal work in the academy, and it's great to see him, being trusted. And I think he was quite key in the Triple Maker deal as well. So it's great to see that, he's been entrusted after all this good work to kind of sign up the next big talents that are coming through. And we should hopefully see some of those guys maybe involved in the first team. But George, moving back to the first team and still a relatively young player as well, I think 21, 22 years of age, Wesley Fofana. We've now seen this week that it's kind of the first moves from the players' side, whether that's through his representatives or through himself now, that he feels disappointed. It feels like Leicester are pricing him out of a move. He's told the club now that he wants to leave and he wants to join Chelsea. He feels like some of those offers have been acceptable. Chelsea have put 2 bids in, obviously preparing a 3rd bid, which they're hoping will be accepted. How important now is it, mate, that we finally had the first movement from Fofana's side to try and push this along? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, he's going to need to come out and say some stuff to kind of push this along a little bit. Chelsea are now in direct contact with Leicester as well, rather than through intermediaries, which is obviously hopefully going to speed that up a little bit. But that player, the player coming out saying those things, or through his entourage or whatever it is, that's a big plus to this deal, isn't it? Surely that's now going to hopefully move it along once a player starts coming out and saying things.
It's a big plus, because then what do you do with a player that doesn't want to be at the club? I think the sensible option is to, doesn't matter how good that player is, I think they need to be moved on. But I will stick up for Leicester a little bit here, because I think that, they have every right to say no. He signed a long-term deal and they're in complete control of what they value him at. And quite rightly so, are also going to inflate the price massively when it's Chelsea knocking on the door, and particularly when they lose Fofana. I mean, they're in big trouble, aren't they? Johnny Evans just cannot cope with the pace that Fofana offers him as a partnership. They seem to be going backwards. I think Rodgers is already struggling a little bit at the start of the Premier League. A couple of draws and losing key players, with a lot of other players linked to other clubs as well. Looking at Maddison, potentially on the move. So they have always been a selling club, and they have also very good money for players in the past. You only have to look at Drinkwater, Maguire, Chilwell. I mean, talking good money for those players at the time. And I stick up for them a little bit, because I think, even though Fofana clearly wants to leave, I mean, we saw it when he was kind of waving goodbye to the fans in the last game. I think, they play the cards, and unfortunately, Fofana might have to take this one on the chin and say, well, you shouldn't have signed a 6-year deal then, should you, really, if you wanted to leave?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Before we get back into that, guys, smash the likes. Apparently, there's only 18 likes on it. There's almost 50 of us in here. So, guys, keep smashing those likes. Just click that thumb button. It's going to take you less than a couple of seconds, and it helps us out, spreads us in the algorithm, get more people tuned in. So please do smash the likes. And also, whilst we're at it, make sure you subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. Please do click that subscribe button. We really appreciate all of the support. But George, on Fofana, I get your point that, Leicester are very much in the driving seat here. He signed a new contract until 2027. They stuck by him for a long-term injury. He's obviously probably their best player in terms of, monetary worth, and probably is their best player in terms of potential and how high his ceiling is. Very much appears now, the player wants to join Chelsea, and it's just it's probably a matter of time. But I mean, Chelsea are very keen not to pay a world record fee for him, because they're very wary of the fact that it's going to be banded about everywhere. World record signing for a defender, has a bad game, world record fee, played terribly, or whatever it is. Very keen to avoid it. Can you understand why the club would be keen to avoid that, particularly on someone so young? Because it comes in for scrutiny wherever you go.
Yeah, it's not. You want to get on with your business quietly, don't you? And this is not the sort of business that Chelsea are doing anymore. Simple as that. We haven't done it for a long time. We used to be pretty much the lead ones in this when Abramovich first came in, signing players left, right, and centre. But I think with Fofana it's slightly different because of the age. I mean, you could argue that Virgil van Dijk got the same amount of stick. Really, a lot of people didn't rate him at all when he went to Liverpool, thinking that was a massive, overplayed deal from Liverpool's perspective. And look how that's turned out. So we've already bid quite an astronomical fee already. So I think
we've bid about 72 million.
I think, yeah, and the rest for everything else. But I think that there for every club, there's got to be a point where you say, you know, it doesn't matter how good this player is, this is our ceiling on price, and that. And we've said on the channel before, I don't think it's. Yes, we would love Fofana. It probably completes an amazing squad of players at the back line, but I don't think it's as essential. I think we've still got enough. It's probably just because Thiago Silva perhaps isn't going to play every game, and therefore you're relying on someone. We've let go of Sarr, so you're looking at perhaps Chalobah. But now James is playing in that inside role with Loftus-Cheek playing in his new role. So perhaps that's a way that Chelsea are looking for if we don't sign Fofana. So it's not the end of the world if we don't get him, but I feel like it's in place. I mean, Fofana says he wants to leave, so it's now up to whether Leicester are going to continue to play hardball or whether they're going to accept that they have a player who doesn't want to play for them anymore and will take the cash. But it is in their hands, and I feel like this one might be stretched out to another window. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, I think this deal will get done. It might drag out a little bit, but it's clear, you know, there's a deal there to be done. The language and the stance is very much softened from Leicester over the weeks. They're prepared. I think they are prepared to sell, but obviously on their terms. And I think another key thing is very much the structure of the payment as well. So, you know, very much like, you know, when you obviously agree a fee, how much that fee's up front, what are the installments going to be, what are the add-ons going to be, how attainable are they going to be? Because let's make no mistake about it. Some add-ons in deals are totally unattainable, but they just put them in there anyway. But I think Chelsea prepared to put the money on the table. So I mean, for Fofana, it's just a case now of waiting. Whether he's played his last game for Leicester or not is hard to tell. Obviously, got a game Saturday. I presume he's going to play. I don't know.
Interesting if he left out, wouldn't it? Yeah.
I mean, I think you can tell if he gets left out, then that's very telling, and you can probably tell that a deal's close. But whilst he's still playing, but at the end of the day, he's still their player, so he's got a right to. You know, Rodgers can pick him every game, and if he wants to. But yeah, I mean, I look at it, and I think this deal will get done, but I think it's going to drag on a little bit. I think the money could hit about 80 million, but again, seems extortionate. But you look at someone he'd sign a personal terms are agreed on a 6-year contract plus one, so maybe with an option for a 7th year. And again, we know contracts don't mean an awful lot in football, but it's very much a investment in Fofana that he'd be here for the future. And if you look at it, yes, 80 million or 85 million, if it ends up being that much, is an astronomical amount of money. But you're looking at someone that could be could be our centre back for the next 8 to 10 years. Then you look at it and you think 8 million a season, essentially, it's not an outrageous investment if he's going to be here for a long time. Plus, Tuchel said, you know, the back line's quite old now. Looking at Silva, I know Chalobah is 31. I'll be here for a while, but a lot of guys the wrong side of 30, and you know, bringing him in alongside the likes of Cucurella, alongside Levi Colwell potentially when he comes back from his loan at Brighton, it's bringing through that next generation of players. Trevor Chalobah and stuff like that. But George Fofana, I mean, obviously makes a massive. It goes without saying, he makes a huge difference, doesn't he, to the back line if he were to come in. I mean, and also, how appealing is it for someone still young to learn from the likes of Thiago Silva and Chalobah? You couldn't learn from two better people.
And I think that's why Chelsea is so keen to bring him in now, not just for the future, but to learn off these players whilst they're here at the club, because they, you know, someone like Thiago Silva is, you know, arguably, well, we think certainly the best central defender in the Premier League. It's the perfect tutor, isn't it, for someone who aspires to be of Thiago Silva's quality in the future. And we are building for the future. You can see that in some of the players that we've brought in. Sterling perhaps going to be here hopefully for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Cucurella the same. So I think it's really exciting. And I you know, again, I'm not too concerned on the money on this one. It's just whether, you know, Leicester are going to, you know, accept the fact that he wants to go and prepare to let him go. But in terms of Fofana, I mean, he can be whatever he wants to be. I've got absolutely no doubts. There are slight concerns over that, you know, the break and the fact that, you know, he had a very horrible injury, and that does impact you psychologically. I think
he's been back playing at a good level though since he's been playing since March.
He has, but then you look at players like Luke Shaw had similar issues, and he's not really been the same player since. So they're when you're paying that sort of money, there's always going to be that question mark of how far do we go for someone who's had an injury like that. I mean, that is part of your history record and your injury list, and it's not an easy one, because if he has a similar type of impact injury, that could be curtains. I mean, that's how serious it is. So you've got to take that into consideration, not just the talent, but I think Chelsea, by the bids that we've put in so far, we're obviously very keen to get this one over the line.
Yeah, we are. It's got to be done. And I mean, George, just say for whatever reason this doesn't get done. I think it will, but just play devil's advocate that this doesn't get done.
Yeah.
Do you think Chelsea have got other targets in mind? Because I can't. There must be some on the list, but we're not hearing any links to them. It's very much all eggs in the Fofana basket. I mean, do you think if this, for whatever reason, was to fall through, do you think we can get by this season with what we've got? Obviously, Cucurella can fill in at left centre back if needed. Obviously we've got Trevor Chalobah as well. Had a great season last season, hasn't featured this season. Had a poor pre-season. Seems to be out of favour. Do you think we desperately need another centre back, or do you think we can get by with what we've got? I'm kind of on the fence. I think we do need another one, just because Aspie's getting on a little bit as well.
Yeah, I do think we need another one, and Tuchel has made it very clear that we need another one. Because again, you've got to factor in Chelsea being in pretty much in all competitions, and we go quite deep into all those competitions. You're looking at 60 plus games in a season. You've touched on the age of some of those players, so rotation is going to be needed. It is really tough. I'm like you, mate. I'm on the fence because I feel like depends what you want Chelsea to be. I mean, if you're saying top four, I think we will be okay with top four with what we've got. We can probably do it. If you're asking Chelsea to close the gap and be a real challenger for the years to come, then no is the answer. We need to probably bring in a couple more. So I would say that this is an important deal to get over the line. But with same with the Gordon situation, I feel like after Fofana it's going to be a bit of a scattergun approach and just kind of seeing what's available last minute, because we are running out of time. And there's nothing wrong with going for your first choice target and trying to go for it right to the end, but I can't see, or I haven't heard Chelsea have any other players in mind.
It does seem to have gone. It does seem to have gone quiet on that front. But I think it's just a case now of just waiting for a breakthrough on Fofana. I mean, George, do you think he should hand in a transfer request? Do you think that has much?
I'm sure he will. Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Do you think that has much? Do you think that has much power? Because I think Leicester know that he wants to leave. Like, do you mean they're not stupid? I mean, do you think handing a transfer request in makes a big difference?
I think it does, like media-wise, because I think then it's almost like a statement of intent that makes it very clear that you're no longer invested in playing for the football club. Some people will, because he hasn't really. I mean, I haven't seen anything. I mean, the things after the game of him, saying goodbye said it all. But he hasn't. I still haven't seen anything directly from his agent or anything publicly to say that he actually is out. He's he could well play next weekend. I think that, as we said, we touched on earlier. I think if he handed in a transfer request and then Roger started to leave him out, I think that says it all. And if a player, like Christensen did to us, said that he doesn't want to be picked and doesn't want to play, I think that's the beginning of the end, isn't it, really? But he has to do that in order to force this move, I think.
Yeah, I mean, literally, this just coming in now about, not that long ago, in the last 10 minutes, that Brendan Rodgers said he's prepared to take Fofana out the squad this weekend if he isn't in the right mindset. But there have not been any further bids. But there have not been any further bids from Chelsea yet. I think the more this goes on, the more his head's going to be turned and he's not going to be in the right mindset. But all we can do really is wait for this to happen at the moment, because other than that, third bid's going in. I think this will be the last bid. I think this has got to be the bid that gets accepted. So it's important with this amount of money to make sure that we get it right. But yeah, guys, almost 100 of us in here, by the way. Let's get this up to 50 likes. Please keep smashing that like button. It really helps us out. So let's get it up to 50 likes, guys. Not hard to do. We're doing well so far. We can definitely do better. So please get those likes up.
I mean, I like my own videos, so that shows. Yeah. If I can like it, then,
every like counts. But yeah, guys, get those likes up, and also please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. We'd really appreciate it. But George, moving away from Fofana, then moving into midfield now. Obviously, the pursuit of Frankie de Jong seems to have hit a bit of a buffer. Chelsea prepared to pay the money for him, but they're still waiting for a decision from him. Is he going to stay at Barca and take that 50% pay cut, which is kind of the ultimatum they issued him with, or is he going to move on? We're sort of just waiting for that decision, really. So it's kind of just a waiting game on de Jong, on the de Jong front. But George, do you think if de Jong doesn't work out, which I think it's more than likely he's just going to stay at Barca anyway, he'll just end up staying there. I think that seems to always happen. But in terms of a midfield player, George, do you still think we need one, mate? Because we've seen that Kovacic is out injured at the moment. He's quite injury prone. Kante, despite how good he is very injury prone as well. That leaves us Jorginho in there with Loftus-Cheek and Gallagher. That's very light. Do you think, given how injury prone Kante and Kovacic are, and given the fact that Gallagher is obviously not fully trusted in terms of like, he's not proven it at a Chelsea level. That's kind of a gamble to play him quite a lot. And Jorginho is obviously, we can't play him every game and run him into the ground like we did for parts of last season. Does a midfield player now almost become quite essential?
It does. But, it was only a couple of weeks ago that we were discussing that it's actually the most, saturated position with loads of options and loads of players that we could have perhaps kept. I mean, we've still got Barkley on the books. Like you said, Loftus-Cheek was playing in midfield at that time. We've got Billy Gilmore. Loads of players that could play there. The truth of it is, from my perspective, I think Chelsea need a lot of players. We need at least we probably need 2 forwards. We need another winger. We need another creative midfielder. But the reality is, we can't address this all in one window. And as much as fans, we'd love to have everyone in every position, and we've sorted it. We're not going to be able to get these all in. And I think if you're looking back on priorities, I think for me personally, a creative midfield is essential. But to Thomas Tuchel and the football club, I think it's quite clear that the centre back and the forward are the other priorities. So De Jong, I mean, it's been quiet. Obviously, I think Sky Sports and the journalists that are out there have remained at their stance that he wants to stay at the football club, and they're trying to resolve that. So unless there's a completely unforeseen turn of events, I can't see him coming to Chelsea. But it's been an exciting roller coaster, and to be, and if they don't solve it, I think there's only very few clubs that could come in the last minute and get him. So that's hopeful for us. But I think the reality is, mate, we need a lot of players, but it's not. I don't think it's going to be addressed, and I'm still okay with the midfield, providing we get a forward in.
Yeah, I just think with how injury prone Kovacic and Kante are, and with Tuchel seeming to prefer Loftus-Cheek as a backup right wing back, obviously he will play in midfield if necessary. I mean, are we comfortable with Gallagher starting a large portion of games this season? I'm not saying he's not good enough, but it's a massive ask for him, particularly playing in that pivot, which I don't think suits him as much. I think he's more of a number 8, but again, we can't address everything in this one window, so we might have to get by with what we've got. But I mean, one player that's kind of popped up was Casemiro at Real Madrid. Man United now seem to be looking at him. Apparently, one report suggested that Todd Bowley and Chelsea have had an interest in Casemiro. I think he's in his 30s now, or he is 30. A great holding midfield player. He's done phenomenally well at Real Madrid. Do you think Casemiro would fit the mould? I mean, I think he would. I think it'd be a great signing. Very much an out-and-out holding midfield player. But I mean, do you think that's right for Chelsea to make a move, or do you think actually if we've got our targets, we should just stick with what we've got and try again next summer rather than for the sake of just bringing someone in?
Yeah, and I'm quite firm on this now. I do think Chelsea, rather than just trying to panic and buy a player for a player, say yes, Casemiro's class, he's top draw, he would definitely add value to the squad. But then, what kind of vision and route are you going down? I think if you really want a player like Frankie De Jong, and it doesn't work, then what's the harm in trying to go next summer for him, and reevaluating the situation in a year's time and waiting. What do Chelsea want to be at this point in time? What's the harm? Everyone was screaming for Conor Gallagher to come back and not send him out on loan and not sell him to another club, and yet he's here. And now Chelsea fans are saying, we want De Jong and all this. So it's a bit of a mixed message. If Chelsea just want to finish top 4, I think we can get by with trialing Gallagher playing there, giving him. He did well at Palace. I don't see what the harm is. I think
he's not playing in his thing. He's not playing in a pivot though. He's playing as a number 8, almost as a number 10 at times.
But we're not Manchester City. No. We're not strolling league titles year after year. Like, what are we? If you're not going to give these players an opportunity now, when are you? And I think Chelsea do have quality in those positions where we don't need to spend, loads of money to get someone in. Elson and Casemiro again. Who's saying no to Casemiro if he comes to Chelsea Football Club? Probably no one. But I think you've got to have some sort of structure and a vision you want to go down. And so far, the signings that we've added have been brilliant and added value. But I think sometimes there's a mixed message if Chelsea fans are screaming, "Oh, Conor Gallagher, don't leave," but then we're not prepared to play him. It just seems a bit silly. I don't. I don't know.
I think if another midfield player does come in, I think he might look and think, actually, do you know what? I probably need to leave on loan. He's at an age, 20 years of age, or maybe just 21. I think he's 20 still, where he could go out on loan for a season or two again, maybe a higher level than Crystal Palace, maybe a slightly better loan potentially, and still develop his game. And with the futures of Kante and Jorginho up in the air, both with 1 year left on their contract, one or if not both of them will leave next summer, and then there's a big space for him in the squad. So it's not, and also with the Winter World Cup as well, he's been in the England squad before. He might think, do you know what, I could have an outside chance of getting in the World Cup squad, but I'm certainly not going to. For me right now, Conor Gallagher, if he stays at Chelsea, is not getting in the World Cup squad for England. He's just not going to play.
Yeah.
He's just not going to play enough minutes. So it's interesting, but I do agree with the fact that Kante and De Jong, not De Jong, Kante and Kovacic are so injury prone. That it does leave us quite light there. It does leave us a bit light there, but we'll have to wait and see what happens on that front. But I mean, realistically, that's pretty much it on all the incomings. I just wanted to touch on outgoings quickly. Obviously we are trimming the squad down. A lot of players are moving on, which is great. We are moving players out, but how annoying is it that a deal for Emerson, where I think in principle a fee of £13 million with £2 million of add-ons was agreed, but that's kind of broken down because of personal terms, which personal terms is basically obviously money at the end of the day. I know there's a lot more to it than personal terms, but money is very much at the root of it. How annoying is it that, 13-15 million pounds to Emerson, I think is a great deal. It would be decent at West Ham. It's fucking annoying when this stuff happens, isn't it? That deal seems to now be off because we've still got a player on our books that just isn't going to play.
Well, Pep Guardiola said in his last press conference, I think sometimes getting rid of players is much harder than bringing them in, because
it is, mate. It's hard to get rid of them.
You can offer them the world, but when they've got a cushy little, pay package and they're at a good club, particularly like Chelsea, where it's situated in London and all the rest of it, it's quite hard to then tell these players that, well, you've got to move house, you've got to get your kids out of school, you've got to take a wage cut, and it is really not easy when these players are on big contracts. They can quite happily, by law, say no and just see out their contracts unless you terminate them, and that's the nature of the beast. But it is frustrating because we've got a lot of players on our books that we know as fans we don't want at the club, but it isn't easy to negotiate these deals. So yeah, that is a frustrating one. But it's a good point you make about I think you'll see that there'll be a lot of changes with outgoings in this window more than most, because of the very fact of what you just said about the World Cup, and players haven't got long to make an imprint on perhaps making their names for themselves to get into that 20 whatever it is, the 23-man squad for the World Cup. So. You'll probably see a lot more in the weeks to come from Chelsea. I mean, I know there's been a few already, so I'd still expect that one to go through.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to think that. I mean, Emerson, not so much World Cup because obviously Italy aren't going. But yeah, hopefully we can move Emerson on. We can maybe revisit that deal potentially. But as it stands, that's off. Another player, Marcos Alonso, on his way out, just still waiting for Barca. That, by all accounts, will happen. It's just not been formalised yet. I think they're waiting to register Jules Koundé first before they then sort out the Alonso deal. But that's good and set to go. And then other defenders, George. I mean, are you surprised that given his breakthrough season last season, Trevor Chalobah, if another centre back comes in, i.e. Fofana, that Chelsea prepared to let him leave, probably on loan, but possibly permanently? I mean, does that surprise you given his breakthrough season, given the fact he's 22? We've seen the likes of Mark Gahey move on to Palace and do very well. Tomori move on and do very well. The fact that Chalobah's 22 years of age, had a great season last season. Yes, there's mistakes in him, but he's still a young player. Mate, it surprises me that we'd be prepared to potentially get rid of him on a permanent basis. I just think that's ridiculous.
It doesn't surprise me that he perhaps wants to go, because Chelsea, history-wise, suggests that, again, bringing in another player of Fofana's quality puts him down the pecking order. He probably thinks, I could play to my absolute maximum and not get near the team. But it surprises me from a Chelsea point of view that we're prepared to let him go, considering we're trying to add to the defensive quality, and then we're saying we're lacking numbers, and yet we're prepared to let someone go who's actually, we've managed to give some experience and he's played some very high profile games and done well in, to then let him go. I get the Sarr one, but Chalobah, you can almost say he's an established first team squad player now.
I'd rather he play at right centre back than Aspie does, but for whatever reason, Chalobah's had no look in this season at all. By all accounts, I think he did have a poor pre-season, but still.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That's why I'm surprised that Chelsea are perhaps listening to perhaps letting him go. But from a Chalobah perspective, I think, if Fofana comes in, what realistically are his chances of breaking through? even if he plays unbelievably, some managers just favour certain players, and he's not. I don't know. It's a difficult one for him.
Yeah, no, Mo, I do agree with this. We need to stop loaning players and start selling. But the problem we've got is because we've signed players in such big contracts, it's hard to actually get any takers for them on the wages. So the only way we can get them out is by loaning them out. So yes, ideally we want to sell them, but because of the poor business in the past with the high wages you offer to players that aren't good enough, it's now really difficult to shift them on. We've got here Johnny Vitamins. If Ziyech is bringing Anthony, Anthony's a top player, but by all accounts, Man United are going to go back in for him. Ajax are wanting about anywhere between 80 to 100 million euros for him, so about 90 million pounds, which is an extortionate amount of money. I cannot see Chelsea doing that, so I don't think they will, as much as I'd like him. What else have we got here? Yeah, guys, get these likes. So we've got 120 of us in here, only 46 likes. We can do better than that. We're getting it close now. Let's get this up to 50 likes, people. 4 more likes. Let's keep smashing the like button, guys. Let's not be lazy. Let's get those likes smashed. And also subscribe to the channel as well, because it really helps us out. So we're heading towards 2K now, so every subscriber helps. So if you're watching now and you're not subscribed, please do subscribe and click that thumb as well. It really helps us out. I mean, George, another one outgoing, which is an interesting one that emerged yesterday. Obviously, he's not playing a lot of football at Chelsea, Christian Pulisic, but how surprised were you to see that Manchester United are considering taking Christian Pulisic on loan from Premier League rivals Chelsea? By all accounts, I think the player would be open to the move. I mean, Pulisic is obviously going to be in the World Cup squad for America. He's not going to play, but the national team manager is saying that, he wants Pulisic to be playing as many minutes as possible, so he's in the best condition possible for the World Cup. What do you think, mate? I mean, by all accounts, I think a talented player, I don't want to say he's surplus to requirements at Chelsea, but it very much looks like his career is fizzling out a little bit at Chelsea. Doesn't really seem like it's happened, and probably a loan move would be good. But I mean, where do you see him? Where do you see him going? I'm pretty sure Chelsea wouldn't allow him to go to Man United. I don't think we'd sanction that. But do you think now that Pulisic is probably going to leave the club?
Yeah, I think so. Unfortunately, just hasn't developed. He's, again, very injury-prone type player, struggles with his fitness. Very talented. I mean, we've seen a couple of really good games from him, but he just hasn't been. Again, I think it was in the region of 57 million pounds.
I actually think we spent 63 million quid on him.
Right. So again, it's a lot of money for a player that just hasn't delivered numbers wise. I really rate him as a player in terms of his attitude and his talent, like I've said, on the ball. I don't think he's pushing for this move because of the World Cup, like you said, Captain America, whatever, he's going to play. But he wants minutes and he's desperate for football, and I don't think he's going to get it at Chelsea. Manchester United, obviously, this is embarrassing from their point of view. It's a complete scattergun approach, just trying to basically see what's available. Chelsea pledged to take strongest. Oh, I just saw something come up there.
Yeah, it's about some racist abuse in the
Spurs game. Song.
Yeah.
Oh well, yeah, but back on Pulisic. Yeah, I think for Manchester United, this is it's desperate. But for Pulisic, I agree. I don't think we'll sanction it for him to go to Manchester United. Not that they're rivals, because they're not, because they're nowhere near us. But
no.
I don't know. I think a loan move to a Premier League club would be beneficial for him. But
do you think somewhere like Newcastle's been touted as well? I mean, could you see a loan move to Newcastle being beneficial?
If they can afford the wages, I think
with this we're going to have to sanction it. We'd have to contribute a reasonable amount. Yeah, or 60-40, whatever it is. Yeah, I think we'd have to sanction a reasonable amount, but. Yeah,
depends what Chelsea want from the deal. I mean, if Chelsea want to keep him and give him another chance, and a loan move to another Premier League club would be beneficial, because we don't want him to go abroad because we want to see how he copes in the Premier League. But again, it's whether people value Christian Pulisic. I mean, I think he'd be a good loan move for most Premier League clubs.
Yeah. I mean, this is a fair point from Lee. Thing about Pulisic, usually one good game followed by 7 to 8 average ones. Like a lot of our attackers, very much lack of consistency. Obviously, we can't let all these guys leave. Pulisic, Ziyech, Callum, all looking to leave potentially. We can't let all 3 of them go. I still think Pulisic will end up staying. I think it will be Ziyech and Callum Hudson-Odoi that end up moving on. But I mean, we haven't got an endless amount of players to bring in. I mean, if we let those 3 go and Aubameyang comes in and Gordon, to be fair, with Pulisic, Ziyech, and Cho left, and Aubameyang and Gordon came in as replacements. I don't think that's dreadful business, but again, it remains to be seen. But a lot of attackers wanting to move on. But for Pulisic, yeah, I mean, obviously just hear Ben Jacobs saying that Serie A is potentially an option as well. As I said earlier, the national team coach is advising to get regular game time. So Ben Jacobs said he's still told that Pulisic is tempted by Serie A should the option present itself. Juventus have expressed some interest. It remains to be seen whether they would advance it. But Pulisic has spoken to Weston McKennie. Obviously, he's US teammate and midfielder at Juventus, and he would be prepared to move there. I mean, George, are you surprised at how many attackers are wanting to leave this summer at Chelsea? Because we got rid of Lukaku, Werner's gone, and then we're looking at possibly Cho, Pulisic and Ziyech. That's like 5 attackers potentially leaving the club this summer. Are you surprised at how many are wanting out?
No, because it hasn't worked, does it? I mean, we bought them in. We bought them in for big fees and with the promise that they were going to be building the future at the club. And we've had a change of manager since then. Just hasn't worked for any of them, has it? Unfortunately, and Tuchel, had an interview in the on the Sunday Supplement podcast I was listening to, talking into depth about. He was really disappointed that it didn't work with Lukaku, and he feels like it was his responsibility to make it work. But we've spoken about it on the channel. He, for as good as he's been defensively, setting up the team and improving those players attacking wise, it's probably been one of the worst periods for Chelsea. Chelsea have always been renowned for having at least one decent attacking player. I mean, you can even go back before the Roman Abramovich year with Zola, Johnson, Hasselbank, Torandre Flo, all those players, great players. And now it's just been one of the worst in terms of return.
No one's clinical.
And I think it's all just been a bit. They're just coming to the end where we've just run out of time and resources for them, where we can't really improve them, and they're getting frustrated because they're not getting game time and not performing, and it's frustrating. And sometimes, yes, we might be a bit light if we let all these players go. But what do you want? Do you want 2 players at the club who want to play for the club, or do you want 5 players who don't want to be at the club? That's where we are at the moment. Transition.
But I think we are in a transition. And to be honest, mate, you can't really argue about any of those players wanting to move on, because at the end of the day, none of them have been good enough. It's as simple as that. The players just have not been good enough. But it's certainly, it is going to be busy in these last couple of weeks of the window. Still a lot of business done, despite the fact of all these players we're linked with and how exciting it is. Still, fact remains that the 3 first-team signings are still the only ones that have come in. Obviously, we've built for the future with Casadei from Inter Milan, with Chukwuemeka, with Slanina, with Omari Hutchinson, etc. We have been active in the market, but in terms of improving the out-and-out first 11, 3 great signings have come in, but we need more, and it is going to be an interesting time. I mean, George, do you think any signings could be done before Leeds on Sunday, or do you think unlikely, given it's now sort of Thursday afternoon? You'd be surprised if anyone was. Not to play against these, but if anyone was announced before Leeds, I think that's a bit of a push.
Yeah, unlikely, but you never know in football. I think that's why we love it. There could be a bid tonight or tomorrow where you're like, and all of a sudden it changes. It could be a tactical one from Chelsea where they put in a final bid for Fofana just before the weekend to upset and disrupt, as you see from clubs. I doubt before Leeds, but I'd be happy with 2 more. I think 5 good first-team signing players would be a fantastic window for Chelsea. The 3 that we've brought in so far have been unbelievable. I mean, really hit the ground running, and hopefully they'll continue to do so. So, if we can get Fofana and possibly Aubameyang, I think that would be a great window for Chelsea. So we've got a couple of weeks left, and let's hope we can get the job done, but by no means over.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think the Fofana one's obviously going to take up a large amount of the money. I mean, George, do you think, I know it said 150 million spree, but Fofana and Gordon alone is 150 million pretty much. I mean, do you think Chelsea will spend another 250 million pounds? Gordon, Fofana, Aubameyang, that's about another 200 million. Can you see that happening?
Definitely, with new owners. I mean, they came in and said they wanted to make a stance and really hit the ground running and make it a thing to the world to say that they're going to change Chelsea, and they've certainly done that. They've put their money where their mouth is, essentially, and they will do in this first window. I think what changes then is that you fear that maybe next year they go on a bit of a stance where they say, "Well, we give you, X, Y, and Z, and we are
going to have to scale the spending back next year for sure. Yeah. We definitely won't be spending as much."
And expectations then turn to Chelsea on closing the gap and Thomas Tuchel because of the money that's been spent. So it comes with perhaps negatives if the performances don't go our way. But I think I wouldn't be surprised if Chelsea spend another 150 million in the window at all.
Oh, mate, I'd be all over it. It would be. I mean, it would be phenomenal. I mean, just get to a couple of things in the chat before we wrap up. But look, I don't know about this argument about system not suiting players. I agree that the way the team's set up might not get the best out of certain players for sure. But look, these guys aren't bad players, but for whatever reason, it's just not working at Chelsea. They either can't do what the manager's telling them to do, or they've not bought into they're not buying into what's being asked. I mean, you look at someone like Sterling, who's a top player. He's not been here that long, and he already looks like he's well integrated into the system. You know, I think he's played pretty well in both games he's played. And he's kind of almost set the standard already for what's expected of someone playing in the Chelsea front line. So I get the point that the system does maybe not suit certain players or go to their strengths. But at the end of the day, you know, you're playing football. You're on the pitch, whether you're playing in a front three with a back three or a back four, surely that's not making that much difference to how you operate as a football player attacking wise. I mean, I could be totally wrong, but I don't think it has as much impact as people like to make out. If you're a good player, then surely it doesn't matter what system you're playing in to a certain extent. Like, obviously, if you're playing 4-5-1, you might not get as much of the ball as an attacker, but generally speaking, if you're a top player, like, the system shouldn't really be too much of a problem. But what else have we got here? I could see that, but only spend what we bring in going forward. Yeah, potentially. I mean, I think a lot of people forget last season that we actually didn't spend any money in terms of actual like net spend because of the money we brought in through player sales. That funded Lukaku. So yes, there was 100 million outlay on Lukaku, but actually that was funded by selling players like Tammy Abraham, etc. We didn't actually spend any money last season, which is a good thing. Carefree wants Pulisic to do well. I mean, look, at the end of the day, we all want any player that puts a Chelsea shirt on, we want them to do well. But I think there comes a point where, you know, after a number of years, if it's not really happened, it's probably best for a parting of the ways. I think that is pretty fair. In regards to Pulisic, how can we say these players are not good enough? They've won the Champions League. The coach has not improved any player since he came in. Even Mendy has a sliding performance. Well, I don't think Tuchel's the problem. But George, do you think it's an easy cop-out to say their players aren't good enough? It's 50-50 in it a little bit. Because it is an easy cop-out at points to say, they're not good enough.
Yeah, it's an easy cop-out because I think you as a coach, it's a coach's responsibility to improve those players, and it's also a player responsibility to take on what's being, you know, said by the manager and to, you know, raise your own standards. And like we said, I think if you're a good enough and an intelligent enough player, you should be able to adapt to most systems. Okay, some might not suit your style of play, but come on, let's be honest. I mean, you're playing football at the end of the day. Timo Werner, look at the chance he had at Chelsea to score goals. You can't say that he didn't have chances to score goals.
Because of the system,
he just missed the target because he wasn't good enough. I mean, essentially, that's what we're talking about. That's nothing to do with Thomas Tuchel or to do with training. That's to do with someone not being able to put the ball in the net when given the opportunity. And again, at Chelsea, yes, there is the case that you're not good enough because we have a different ceiling to other clubs. Maybe at Southampton or a Newcastle, yes, that might be good enough to not play that well all the time. But at Chelsea, you get maybe 1-2 years to prove yourself. And if not, you're out because we have to win things. We're a club that aspires to be the best in the country or the best in the world even. So therefore, yeah, they won the Champions League, but we've said this before. It's
that papered over the cracks big time.
It does paper over the cracks. You can go through, you know, periods of the season where you've got a momentum shift and, you know, a lucky draw, which we did have quite a few just draw up until the final. You know, were we the best team in Europe? Absolutely not.
No. But having said that, we had the best defensive record in the history of that competition from winners.
Yeah, that's how we won it.
We did very well. That's how we won it. Yeah.
That's the best team in Europe for probably the last couple of years, but they haven't won it. So I mean, that just, you know, I think a cup competition. I mean, yeah, but I'm not saying Pulisic isn't good enough. I just think that
he hasn't delivered at Chelsea.
He hasn't delivered, and therefore Chelsea have to look elsewhere.
I think there's a difference between not being good enough and not delivering. Christian Pulisic,
they're all good enough. They're professional.
Yeah, they're absolutely good enough to play for Chelsea, but are they good enough to deliver quality football on a week in, week out basis? That's a different conversation. I think that's
Yeah,
I think that's where we're at. But yeah, guys, it's a good point. I think that seems like a good place to round up, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. Good numbers this afternoon. Appreciate it as always. Please make sure on your way out, guys, you smash those likes. Let's get those likes up. Let's try and get them towards the 100 mark if we can. So smash those likes, and more importantly, subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. It'd be great to have you as part of the community, get you on board. So please do subscribe to the channel as well. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for getting involved in the chat. Really appreciate all your input. Try and get through as much of it as I can. When it's coming up on the screen quickly, it's hard to get to everyone's comments, but we do really appreciate it. George, thanks for your time as always, mate. Hopefully in the next couple of days, guys, there'll be some more transfer news. We will be back tomorrow with a preview for the Leeds game at some point, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But until then, guys, take care. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Up the Chelsea, smash the likes, and click that subscribe button on your way out. Cheers.